Welcome to the Association 4.0 podcast, your association's no-fluff playbook to navigating and thriving in Industry 4.0 or the digital marketplace. Each week, we bring expert insights to help you and your association stay ahead of the curve.
Hello, my name is Sherry Budziak, and I'm the host of the Association 4.0 podcast. I am also co-founder of .org Community and founder and CEO of .org Source, a consultancy to associations. Today, my guest is Thad Lurie. Thad is Senior Vice President of Digital and Technology at the American Geophysical Union. AGU is a global community supporting more than 500,000 advocates and professionals in earth and space sciences. AGU aims to advance discovery and solution science that accelerate knowledge and create solutions that are ethical, unbiased, and respectful of communities and their values. So thanks for joining me today, Thad. I'm so excited to have you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Working with an organization that's on the forefront of scientific development gives you kind of an inside view of the future. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and then tell us about AGU and how you guys are preparing over the next few years?
Sure. Well, I've been in the IT side and the operations side of the association industry for almost 25 years now. Always happy to have these conversations and participate. I think a lot of what we do well as associations is collaborate and listen to each other, and we learn from each other. So it's really great that you're hosting things like this and putting these conversations out there. On the AGU front, we are the largest community of Earth and space scientists out there. It's a big organization and it wields a lot of influence. It's really been a pleasure working with them, learning more about the mission. Right now, our focus points are really to continue to advance science and research and solutions around Earth and space science, to support the community, make sure that it is, just science, ethical science, inclusive science. And also, one item on our strategic plan is around organizational excellence to ensure that, we're doing things in the best way possible, that our internal workforce is supported and so forth. So putting all that together to make sure that we support our members and give our community the best experience and the most value possible. I think, that's what a lot of associations are trying to do. And sometimes the devil is in the details. It's really about how we're doing it and how we're executing.
Yeah. As an IT leader, what are your current priorities today? And I guess what are some of what you've seen are some of the challenges and some of the opportunities?
Well, I was very lucky in that I inherited a solid tech stack and a very, very good staff. So I've had the luxury of being able to come in and really position myself strategically across the business the way that an IT leader wants to, right? We don't want to sit there and spend time worrying about, why we have to migrate these legacy servers into the cloud. Thankfully, I inherited a relatively advanced infrastructure and well thought out architecture. So I've really been able to focus more on the people side, building and repairing some relationships that maybe weren't where we wanted them to be, and helping the organization with things like product development, really looking forward into the vision of what we're going to want. How are we going to use some of these new technologies that are coming to the forefront, not only for the organization, but on behalf of our members? And what are we doing to invest in the future? How can we help the other areas of the business become more efficient, think differently about what they're doing, provide new products and services that give value to our members? So really all the things that, we really want to do that are exciting and fun, I get to spend a lot of my time doing those. So I'm quite thankful.
That's great. Yeah. Usually people in your role end up inheriting a mess and, a bowl of spaghetti that they have to untangle. So that's great that you didn't have to do that. That's awesome. So that just kind of follow up when you talk about the people side. I've been thinking a lot about the intersection of culture and technology. How do you see culture impacting your activities, and what do you do to kind of help strengthen that human side of your operations?
That's a great question. And, to go back a little ways, I think it's a question that technology ignored for a long time. We had the answers to certain technology challenges, and we believed we were the only ones that understood them and can implement them. And we kind of black box a lot of things, which came back to bite us, 10 or 15 years later.
Yeah.
I think now technology executives really understand that helping to influence and guide the culture of the organization has impact on everything we do, from product selection to adoption to product development to generating revenue to streamlining process. It's all intertwined with your organizational culture. Thankfully, at AGU, the culture is very strong, very people-centered. I have the ability, even I would say a mandate, to support my team, make sure they feel psychologically safe, that we have open conversations, that people are comfortable challenging ideas and concepts, that we have open conversations and collaboration and ideation, that all that takes place out in the open. So there's a great deal of transparency and communication, not only within my unit, but also, as I mentioned earlier, we spend a lot of time and effort making sure to build and maintain relationships with all the other business areas. Because in the end, operations is supporting a lot of what's going on in the organization. And the more we understand the business, the better we can help be that trusted advisor to say, here's what we see coming. We might be able to take advantage of this opportunity. Or, what I'm seeing in the data coming from the usage of this product tells us that we believe XYZ. So if we're to, reposition it this way, or to try and position it in front of this new audience, we think it's going to be successful. We're really able to provide that guidance and advice to the business, and then be a part of the conversation of how we grow together, how we provide more value. And that's really where we want to be positioned. So I think being very intentional about how we interact with the culture and help move it forward is really, really critical.
Yeah, I agree. I've always used to say, IT needs to be at the table and be part of the conversations because, as you said, sometimes there can be technology that can enable something to be done quicker, better, whatever those cases might be. But if you're not part of those conversations, then that's where folks struggle. So that's great. So Thad, on a different page, you gave a really interesting presentation previously at one of our .org community events about understanding the context behind data. Talk a little bit about the important idea and how your perceptions about that may have changed since that presentation.
They haven't changed. If anything, they've gotten stronger. I think having watched how organizations use data, there's still, I think, progress to be made. In many cases, organizations are starting to use data more often for contextual decision making and informing what they're talking about. But I think we still need to make more progress. We started with data and then we moved to reporting. And I think we still need to take, in many cases, that last leap to insight. So it's the difference between looking at a spreadsheet and understanding that, you have 10% more members than you did last year. Great. That's helpful. But understanding who those members are and why the numbers are shifting the way they are, and looking at it longitudinally over a long period of time to understand the trend, where your demographics are going up, what audiences are you going down, what kind of products they're using, how are they engaging, where are your volunteers coming from. Those are all things that I would say are not in a report or a spreadsheet. You can make insights by collecting the data and looking at it to understand, well, we're gaining student attendees and we're losing attendees that are, in a different stage of their career. Does that have anything to do with our content offering? Does that have to do with travel restrictions? And trying to answer some of these questions as we're making decisions about products, programs, services, conferences, the kind of content we offer, how we offer it, the channels, where people are seeing things, all of that comes together to what I consider to be, and I'm doing air quotes, informed decision making, where we have data that is answering some of those initial questions and allowing us to make our decisions in a more informed way and in a smaller universe of possibilities. That's going to lead to better business outcomes, which is really where we want to be. And so I think making sure that our data is consistent, that it's of quality, and that we use it. I mean, I'm sure you know of lots of organizations, just like I do, that are collecting mountains of data with no real purpose.
Right.
They're collecting it because they feel like they should be collecting it. And then it doesn't actually get used at all. So I think looking at the data that we have and then being more intentional about what we're collecting and why, and then listening to it. It's really easy to discount the data when you don't like what it's telling you, but that doesn't mean it's any less true. And so having people that are skilled in navigating from raw data to report to insight and storytelling, I think that's where we really make an impact in that last stage. Because if you're trying to explain a very complicated report to someone that is not super, data curious, you're probably not going to make a lot of headway. But if you can tell them a story that has emotional resonance and impacts them, they're going to remember it and it's going to impact their decision making more effectively.
I like that. I think I'm going to steal that from you, Thad, the listening to it. I like those words. Okay, topic of the moment where everybody's talking about AI. Everybody's calling me to present on AI. So I've got to ask the question, are you guys at AGU using AI, and how, if you are?
We are in the process of making what I hope are well-informed decisions about how we can best leverage AI for our business. AI has been a bit of a thunderbolt in academia, which is where a lot of our members come from. They're already having to put countermeasures in place for students that are attempting to write papers or submit research that is actually
Yeah,
generated by AI. So it has created waves, and there have been a lot of conversations around how AI is impacting our industry. As an organization, internally looking at what AI can do for us. Honestly, when we did a meeting and talked about it and analyzed what was possible, there were a lot of potential uses that came out of it. Could we use AI to provide, automated concierge services for our annual conference where we have 28,000 people to answer questions around registration? We get over 20,000 abstracts submitted. People have lots of questions about the process. Could we use an AI to potentially help there? We have over 100 years of publications and articles, hundreds of thousands of pieces of content. Is there a way we can use AI to improve findability, usability, accessibility? Is there a way we can use AI to aggregate information? We have folks submitting very dense scientific abstracts, sometimes with English not being their first language. Is there a way we can use AI to generate natural language summaries that are very brief and easy to understand? All of these things are possible. Can we translate some of our content into other languages, either on the fly or later as a video on demand? There are so many possibilities. I think we're just trying to be really deliberate in our thinking because we don't have unlimited funds. We
right.
have to
Yeah.
place our bets, and they're not going to be that big. So my approach has been to kind of shepherd the organization towards picking one or two things that we think will be of high value, and then making an initial investment, ginning up a proof of concept, and seeing what we can do. And if it
Yeah.
works really well, we can expand it into a full-blown program, figure out how we're going to fund it, et cetera, et cetera. But what I don't want to do is just start throwing AI at everything and then get things that are out of control, possibly get into ethical consideration type situations, which we desperately want to avoid. I think we can use it as a business catalyst. It's just really about picking our spots. We don't have an unlimited investment budget, and we want to try to pick things where we're going to have significant impact and value for our members without having to make huge changes to what we're doing.
Yeah. And I always tell people, I'm like, what problems are we trying to solve for? I think that's everybody, that's to your point, is trying to throw AI at everything. And I think we did, or at least I did, I don't know, depending on who's listening in on our conversation back when we all went through the website, like, okay, we've got a website and what can we do? And we're going to compete with the .coms. And I was in the midst of all of that. So some of it was great, to your point, like some of it, was around for 5 years, but a lot of the things that we did because we could went away. So where, staying focused and where, you're going to have the most bang for your buck is, I think, really an important conversation. So you talked a little bit about your members and how their professional lives are changing as a result of AI. Talk to us a little bit about that. I'm interested.
I mean, AI and the use of AI has become, I think, a lot more commonplace in a lot of industries. Academia is challenging. You have students who are trying to write papers using AI, and there's considerations and ethical questions around that. I think universities are kind of tackling it at their own level. I don't think there's any regulations around it quite yet. I think some organizations have stated that you can't use AI for certain purposes. I know we have an ethical framework for our industry. It's not necessarily for AGU specifically, for how research is conducted in an ethical manner. I don't think it specifically deals with AI, although I believe we are drafting a policy recommendation for how, that might work in our industry. But in many ways, people see, I think, what AI can do, and we're still just scratching the surface. And in some ways, the AI is still developing. I know my son, who is an artist, is very anti-AI art. If you look at AI art, it all kind of looks the same. It's kind of like CGI backgrounds in movies. Like now we can tell when, the city or the forest or the whatever is CGI. I feel like the AI art is a little bit like that. And I'm not sure if the AI generated content will be like that too, because it writes in kind of a singular voice, and maybe we'll be able to tell at some point. But for now, I read about a study where they gave people articles to do peer review and then identify whether or not the abstracts were written by humans or AI. I believe their percentage accuracy in identifying the ones written by AI was in the mid 50s. So they got about half, which isn't great. And they identified, I believe, 15% of the human written abstracts as having been written by an AI.
Oh,
So
geez.
as humans, I think we're struggling with this a little bit. What I've heard, from others is maybe we'll use AI to find AI. So, use the problem to solve the problem. I don't know enough about, how the algorithms are working and what is possible to determine how exactly we're going to manage this and whether it's good or bad or, neither.
Right.
But there's no doubt that 5 years from now, a lot of things are going to be done very differently because they can.
Yeah. So I guess to follow up on that, like, what do you think that these changes are going to have on the association kind of structures or business models, or have you even thought that far ahead?
I have. I think there's going to be quite a few. If I had to pick one, the one I've spent the most time thinking about is actually taxonomy, partially because we have so much content and looking at our taxonomy, which has thousands of entries, and we're trying to make some modifications to bring it up to date with more modern terms and some things that didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago. You look at that and you look at how we use meta tagging for search and browse type functionality, and I start to wonder if 3 years from now if that's going to exist at all. Because we tag things so that we can find them as humans, and that's how we think about it, because we can't process a database of thousands of pieces of content simultaneously. We have to group them into buckets so we can find stuff. The AI doesn't think that way. It can process thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of giant content records and hold them all and then relate them to each other. So what if 3 years from now, instead of coming and running a Google search and looking for something and then using filters with the taxonomy tags to, drill down into the 83 articles that maybe one of them's in there, what if I interact with an organization's content with a prompt and I enter a question I'm trying to answer or a problem I'm trying to solve, and it gives me answers? It gives me thoughts, it gives me ideas, possibilities, and those are all generated directly from our entire content offering that it has trained itself on. There's no need for taxonomy anymore.
Yeah.
You're interacting with the entire content base all the time in a very efficient manner, which right now, it's theoretically possible. We've got a lot of work to do. But so I'm looking at that and thinking, gosh, associations are huge content centers. What if we could work together to find a way to do this really well and change the way we think about delivering and serving content? And that's
interesting. Yeah. That's the one thing. Yeah.
One thing. And
Well,
there's a lot more.
I did read something this morning that they said they're not sure 100%, but there is rumors that OpenAI is actually creating a search to compete with Google. So it'll be interesting as these technologies, everything, as you said, kind of is moving so fast, and just trying to pay attention and keep up. And then, really thinking about what is the impact to our organizations down the road here. But I think down the road is going to be much quicker than, I use the example of building websites. The first website that we built for our association, we spent almost 2 years on it. I don't think we're going to have that type of luxury today. So it's an interesting conversation. So to kind of switch gears again, what do you think boards need to do to help associations be successful today?
That's a good question. I think in some ways it depends on the organization and what the role of the board is, how it's been defined. I like to think of boards as a guiding entity that provides advice, provides feedback, understands the membership and their stance, their views, their needs, and is able to represent that. So I sometimes think of it in 3 levels: the why, the what, and the how. The why is the mission. Why are we doing this? And obviously the board is very heavily involved there. The what is more of the products and services and the things that the members need and want. And that's kind of a shared responsibility between the board and the staff. And then you get to the how. And that's where the staff really comes into play to execute, make things happen, draw plans, employ tactics, whatever it takes to get these things done. I think there's a relationship there that needs to be carefully maintained and outlined so that everybody understands it. With respect to technology more specifically, I love to see boards that are curious. I love to see boards that want to understand how we're using technology to further the mission, to develop products and services. But really, every board is different. Who's on it, what their charge is, how the organization runs, the history, the context. There's a lot to that. It's a big question.
Yeah. Well, I got another big question that I've been asking everybody lately. So how do you see the role of associations in society changing in the future? Like, do you see them revisiting their missions? Do you see new kinds of responsibilities? Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's a big question. I think there is still a need for associations. And ironically, COVID sort of proved it to us. We came out the other end of COVID, having watched our trade shows and meetings vanish to essentially nothing. And I think there was a question there. Do people, especially the next generation, they tend to self-organize, they're digital native, they're much more used to kind of putting everything together themselves. And yet, at least at AGU, we're seeing very strong student response after COVID. People wanting to come back to the meeting, people wanting to get back in person, people wanting to serve on committees. I think we have this need for connection, which has been sort of amplified by the fact that, people were at home for quite a while. And in many ways, with the remote workforce still are. All of a sudden, these meetings are becoming even more important. I'll also steal from Ken Holsinger at Freeman. I saw a presentation of his that was just outstanding. One of the things he pointed out was sources of truth by generation. What do we trust for news and information? And in this case, news and information about things that are very close to our hearts and our mission, especially with Gen Z and Gen Alpha. The level of trust for social media and internet sources is rapidly declining, with good reason. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there. Ironically, their number one trusted source of information was an in-person event.
Oh,
So
wow.
you look at information and you look at associations as holders of peer-reviewed scientific information, which I think, we believe is trustworthy. How do we disseminate that? How do we build those connections and find people and other sources of information that we can trust? We do it by association. And so I do think there is a place for us as we go forward. We need to be intentional about how we leverage that and make sure that our information is very high quality, easily accessible, inclusive to all. There are challenges, absolutely, but I also believe that it's going to be important that we become these centers of understanding and knowledge that we can share, that is trustworthy, and that we can bring people together in that way. So yeah, I'm hoping to see more of that.
We work with a medical society. We did some interviews with some physicians, and they were talking about how it was hard to find information on that association's website. So they started following this doctor. This was younger physicians, doctor on TikTok. And I was like, that's interesting. And this was like over a year ago that we had these conversations. So I've been kind of watching it carefully. But then I saw a news report today that was talking about, TikTok, everybody's on there saying, use this oil, use castor oil, they're going to, and now these physicians are having these discussions around how do we get people off thinking that castor oil is going to cure every single disease and that they need to come to a physician. So anyway, that's just one example that's top of mind to me. I've been kind of living it and kind of watching it. But to your point, which I think, is always come back to, and I feel as you were talking, which I haven't really thought about this until you were talking about it, that it's kind of come full circle. Like we were the experts, right? And then all of a sudden the world became experts in everything, and people were getting information because you could from the web, Google, whatever it might be. And now because of that and where we are in our society and the access to wrong information is so rampant, we are the source of truth again. So anyway, I don't know. I think that actually gives me like a lot of like hope and optimism when you're looking at, we always tend to go, are people joining, or there's a decline in people coming to our meetings, or all of those discussions that people have had over the last couple of years since COVID. I think you're right. Like we can really stand up and say, okay, but this is where you can make sure that, the information you're receiving is valid or whatever those cases might be. So those are some great thoughts. I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Yeah. So, well, thanks, Thad. It's been a great discussion. I love talking with you. I could talk to you all day. And thanks to our listeners. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if people want to reach out to you, Thad, what's the best way to do that? Through LinkedIn or?
Yeah, LinkedIn is great. Always happy to, talk with people, start conversations, whatever I can do to help. We're all a team in this industry. So happy to do it.
Well, thanks for joining me today. Appreciate it.
Thanks again, Sherry. It's been great.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and discovered tips and information that will add value to your leadership style and your association. .org Source specializes in positioning teams for success with solutions for technology, strategy, and marketing. Please contact us at info@orgsource.com or visit www.orgsource.com to find out how to keep your organization on track to Association 4.0.